Hello and welcome back. In this video, we will be discussing influential points. This was briefly mentioned in a video I did a while back, and we're going to just take a deeper dive into it in this one. So, influential points. Let's go over some vocabulary. An influential point is a point that substantially changes the regression line when added or removed. High leverage, an unusual X value with potential to influence the regression line. Outlier, a point that does not follow the overall pattern, and residual observed value minus predicted value. Cool stuff we've talked about a bunch. All right, let's just dive right in with an example. So here we have hours students studied and score they got on an exam. Okay, so here we have a visual of what that data would look like. Yeah, without an influential point. And you can see we have a very straight regression line here. The residuals are all super low from the lines to the points. Okay. And we make a note here. The regression line fits the data without any unusual X values. Now let's take a look at visual 2 here, regression with an influential point. And I don't want to go there just yet because I just want to comment on the bottom right here. We're going to add the point 12, 95. Okay. It's going to be a large jump in X and also a large jump in Y. And when we do that, our point's all the way out here now. So here we have an example of an influential point because we have a large jump here in the X and it's bringing our line out a little bit further. Okay. And also another thing to comment about it, if we compare this line to this line, look how this line touches all the points here. There we go. It touches every point. Our new point here brings the line down a little bit, and now it's not touching this point, not touching that one. So it's creating larger residuals. Okay. And it says here, the new point pulls the regression line because it has a much larger X value. Okay. So now let's compare this to outliers. All right. Influential point versus outlier. An outlier has a large residual. An influential point has a large effect on the regression line. A point may be one, both, or neither. A point can be an influential point without being an outlier. It could be an influential point and be an outlier, or it could be neither. Those are pretty much your options. So back to the last point. This is the last example we had with the same exact point here. In this example, it's not an outlier. Okay. This point has a high leverage X value, but remains close to the overall trend. So it's influence without being an outlier. And it's not an outlier pretty much because while it does manipulate our least squares regression line, it's still very close to the overall trend of the data. Now, here's an example. This is a much more obvious example. If our point was say 1260 as opposed to 1290, whatever it was, look how much it changes this line. Now this line touches none of our points. Adding this point completely skewed our line in a negative direction. This trend is still overall positive, but not as positive as it is here. So this was a good example of a high leverage and large residual that is an outlier in our data. Okay. This point has both a high leverage X value and a large residual, making it both an influential point and an outlier. Okay. So again, here's an example of an influential point that's not an outlier, keeps the line mostly the same, or is not an outlier. And this one is an outlier because of how drastically it changes our least squares regression line. All right. Some common mistakes: assuming every outlier is influential, ignoring unusual X values, and thinking influential points must have large residuals. And in this example here, this influential point still has a very small residual. All right, cool. Let's take a look at some practice problems. 1, define an influential point. 2, differentiate an influential point from an outlier. 3, why do high leverage points affect the regression line? And 4, what happens if an influential point is removed? Feel free to pause here and take a stab at these problems. Cool. I hope we did so, and let's take a look at the solutions. So define an influential point. An influential point is a point that substantially changes the regression line. Differentiate an influential point from an outlier. Outliers have large residuals. Influential points strongly affect the line. Now, again, they could be an outlier, but not always. 3, why do high leverage points affect the regression line? They are far from the mean X value. And the high leverage, again, an example of that is just like in both of these examples, how there's no 9, 10, or 11, and we just jump straight to 12. That's our high leverage X value. And 4, what happens if an influential point is removed? The slope and or intercept may change considerably. And if it's an outlier, it's going to definitely change it considerably. If it's not an outlier, it might not change it so considerably, but it always could. Depends what the data is. Anywho, that's everything I have for you on influential points. Thank you for tuning in. As always, a link to the notes will be in the video description, and I will see y'all next time. Take care.